Hi, in this video for teachers who like writing materials, I'm going to be talking to Robert McLarty, who is the editor of a journal called Modern English Teacher. And we talk a little bit about his work on the magazine, but we talk more generally about what to write if you want to publish an idea in an ELT journal, what kind of articles they're looking for, the format of your articles, and some of the different motivations for writing and getting published.
Right, good morning, everybody. My name is Robert McLarty. As John said, I'm the editor of Modern English Teacher and have been for 9 years now, I think, something like that. It comes out 6 times a year. We have about 25 articles every issue. So there's always lots of scope for new contributors, old contributors, and regular contributors. I used to be in publishing, I used to be in materials writing, and when the previous editor left, I was approached to take over the job and have sort of done it ever since.
Can you just, I don't want to talk about MET specifically, but in terms of journals for teachers, where does MET sit perhaps in relationship to one or two other journals that teachers might write for?
Teachers might write something quite academic based on fairly serious and lengthy research in something like ELT journal. That's probably the high end academically. And then there are other online magazines and print magazines which are also available. I think we're probably the most widely read mainstream practical English teacher based journal magazine, and our readership is probably half and half, native English speakers, non-native English speakers. And I think, again, anecdotally, we probably have primary, secondary and tertiary sector teachers reading the journal and writing articles for it.
Okay, great. Now I know with MET you receive, presumably teachers just send in an article. Do they ever write to you and say, before they write the article, say, I've got this idea, are you interested? Or normally do they just send you the article?
Normally they send an idea, which is what I prefer, because rather than receive something oven ready, it's best just to write in, I find, and say, look, this is what I've noticed. This is what I've heard about. This is what people are talking about in our staff room. This is the idea we've come up with. Do you think that'd be an interesting article for us to put an article together about? And 9 times out of 10, there's enough of an idea there for me to say, yep, go ahead. Send a little abstract first of all, just covering the main points. And then if I think that's a good idea, then I'll approve it and we can go ahead. And I'll usually give you 2 or 3 months to write it.
So the abstract would be what, like a paragraph or 2 paragraphs?
Yeah, just a very short paragraph. What you've noticed, what solutions you've found, what you've read about it, if you want to back it up with some academic thinking, what your colleagues say about it. Both of those approaches are absolutely fine. I don't mind if your idea is backed up by classroom research or read academic research. Both are equally valid for us.
What would it be about somebody's proposal that would make it jump out at you and say, oh, that's going to make a good one?
Usually that it's something that the person has seen in their everyday teaching life, that the little picture they paint of their classroom, I can see exactly where they're coming from, and that the solution or the idea they've worked on to get over the problem is interesting. That doesn't mean it's new. It could well be a reworking of something from 10, 20, 30 years ago. It could be a reworking of something that's been published in a course book. Anything is fine, provided my readers can read the article and go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. I can use some of that. Or, oh, that's interesting. I can't use it because that doesn't really concern my classes. What we don't want people is to read it and go, yeah, so what? So a nice positive reaction from the readers is what we're looking for.
And in terms of writing style, I mean, for something like ELT journals, it's sort of academic, so there's certain kind of requirements. Do you think there's are there any ways, if somebody said, how should I structure this? How should I say, I've got my idea, but what do you want the style and structure to be like? What are there any tips you can give on sort of good structure?
It's pretty much like maintaining people's interest in a workshop or in a teacher's meeting or at a teacher's conference. Your hook is quite important. You've got to attract their attention in the first paragraph, which usually either an interesting little incident or an observation or a quote. And then your article should have 3 or 4 ideas spread nicely across the 2 or 3 pages. And as I say, backed up always by evidence. So facts, observations, things you've read, things you've been told, quotes from people. And as you flick through an article, you should be able to seize the 3 or 4 main ideas just by scanning the article.
And for example, if I'm flicking through here, usually articles have, well, obviously they have a heading or a title. Do you write those, or does the person who's written it provide them?
I usually write them because most people's titles are far too long. They try and really put everything into the title, and you can't. And we need titles that, from a design perspective, sit nicely on the page. And then the strap line will go into a little bit more detail about the meaning of the title, and we'll try and explain what the article is about. And then in certain articles, you'll see what we have: pulled quotes, so little sentences pulled out of the text in larger font, which is a standard publishing trick for, again, attracting the reader's eye. So if it's easy to find some pulled quotes, it usually means it's a good article. If I struggle to find some pulled quotes, it's because there's a lot of trees and not a lot of wood. So
what about, I noticed, for example, some articles use subheadings a lot. I tend to use them when I write an article because I think they help people sort of navigate their way through the thing and pick out the key points. Some don't. Do you have any feelings on that?
Horses for courses. If it's a sort of listy type article, the 8 things I noticed during online observation we've just done for the July issue, clearly there were 8 points in the list, and they just had a nice little heading each time. Other articles, the actual paragraphs work instead of headings, and they will have topic sentences kicking off each paragraph, which will bring the eye of the reader to the main point of the paragraph. So I don't have a problem whether you want to sort of have headings or not.
Okay. I think the first time I got published was with the journal English Teaching Professional, probably about 20 years ago. And I remember the first thing I got feedback from an editor, and I found that probably the most useful part of the process, because I had an experienced editor saying, actually, can you fix this and this? What is the editorial process nowadays, and how many drafts would you normally expect to do with a writer?
If it's been well conceived and the idea is solid and we've agreed the correct number of words, then first draft should come in and be hopefully pretty much there. I then read it. It then goes out to a second editor to read it. She or he will then make some suggestions in terms of content, because it might well be that there aren't enough ideas to justify the length, or there isn't enough evidence to back up the points being made, or some points are made without enough evidence, etc. Usually then back to the writer with just a couple of suggestions for rewrites, and after the second draft it should be ready. It'll then be copy edited and proofread, etc., for the nasties and the typos to be pulled out. But really, you shouldn't be sending stuff in without having checked it for typos, etc. But yeah, 2 drafts and you should be pretty much there.
And what tips? So if somebody's written their article, what could they do before they send it to you to do sort of one last kind of editorial check? Obviously they can spell check it or that kind of thing, but is there any other sort of things they could do to give it the once over before they really send it off?
I think what most people do is they give it to a colleague to read, and if a colleague understands it, And if a colleague sees that there's sufficient interest in it, and a colleague will then help tidy up the glaring errors, that's probably the best way to go ahead, is just to get it read by a friend or a family member or colleague, and then off to us.
Okay. I mean, the other technique I often use, if I tend to read articles out aloud and see how they sound, because I tend to write in a way that's speaking. I'm thinking, if somebody was listening to me, does it sound interesting and does it flow in that way?
Exactly, because I've often said that if you can make a little 20-minute presentation or a 15-minute presentation, then your structure of your presentation is usually a good enough structure for an article to follow anyway. So yeah, good idea. If you can just read it out, does it sound plausible? Does it sound wordy? Do you get repetitive? Does it become boring? Are you making the same point far too many times? And then at that point, a reader will go, oh, you know, I'm being turned off. It also helps you to see that your references really are backing up your point and not being put in just to make the article look academic. So your references, anything you cite, must really reinforce the point you've made.
Okay. Last couple of questions. Why do you think people write articles? I mean, if you imagine you're a busy teacher, you may be teaching 30 contact hours a week. What is it, do you think, that motivates people to write for your journal?
We've asked this question quite a few times this year. We've been doing video interviews with contributors, and one of the questions we've asked is, why do you do it? Obviously, some people just feel they become better teachers by writing about a facet of their own teaching, because if you sit down, look at a problem, analyze it, come up with some solutions, discuss it with your peers, and then put a piece together, then you will be much more on top of that facet of your teaching than somebody who doesn't do that. So it's like micro personal development, professional development, if you like, for yourselves. That's the main thing. Second thing is just teachers do like sharing ideas. Teachers have pretty much the same problems wherever you're teaching, whoever you're teaching. And if you do come up with a neat way of engaging people's interest at the start of a lesson, or making writing interesting, or finding ways of teaching listening that genuinely does improve the student's listening skill, then that's worth sharing, because I think we're all struggling with what is an imperfect craft. You know, teaching English doesn't always work. So any help with you to overcome your professional frustrations, overcome uneasiness in the classroom, making your lessons more interesting is a big help. So sharing ideas, I mean, I do like to think of MET as being like a giant staff room where there's, you know, the very experienced guy in the corner who knows it all, trying to impart some ideas, and there's the new teacher who's seen it with a brand new eye and in fact has some great things to say. So I would say to anybody, don't feel you're not experienced enough to write for your colleagues. You have a lot of fabulous insights in year one, and they can be shared. Absolutely.
Okay, great. One other reason might be, and I get asked this on training courses, how do I get publishers to notice me? How do I get my work noticed? Do you think big publishing companies take notice of the articles in MET? Do they read it? Do you know? Do they find authors from it?
That's a huge question. I don't know if they find them from it, but I think if you're talking to a publisher and they ask to see your CV, and one of the things you've done is write regularly for your own blog or for published magazines such as MET, that's going to be proof. It's part of your portfolio that you can write. You can write and you can respond to feedback and you can be edited. And I think they're all quite handy things for publishers to know, because it's great to take on writers, but if the writer then doesn't respond well to feedback, can't improve on a first draft, then they're probably not going to be of great use to a publisher.
Okay, and one final question: do you get paid?
Me?
Not you. Well, I'm sure you. I don't know.
Yes, we do. We have a very transparent payment system, which goes from a review, which is book reviews, which come in at £40 per item, Articles of 2 to 3 pages, which is 12 to 1800 words, is £65 per article, and more than 4 pages, so 2400 plus, is paid at £100 per article. So yeah, we, as I say, we have 25 different contributors for every magazine, 6 times a year. So I'm essentially looking for 150 teachers every year to write for me.
Thanks very much to Robert McLarty. I hope you all found that interesting, useful, maybe give you some ideas on how to get published in a journal.